From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the program. Punishing Italy, the battle over Rome's budget and how it could affect European elections. Opposing Brexit as Theresa May sits down with Jean-Claude Juncker, we take stock of rising European objections. Dangerous message, will the US response to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi embolden other regimes? Bah humbug, a German city raises the alarm over kids' Christmas wishes and EU privacy laws. And Paw and Order, a political pet gets a helping hand at 10 Downing Street. All right, it is time to meet our panel for tonight. I am joined by our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, which of the stories are you watching closely?
Brexit, because we can't get away from it, Tessa. And interesting developments tonight. We know, first of all, that Jean-Claude Juncker and Theresa May are meeting. Looks like this is also going to be another crucial couple of hours in this Brexit story, with suggestions that Sunday's special EU Council meeting could be cancelled because of disagreements, not just from Britain, but from other European countries too.
Another twist to the Brexit story. All right, also joining us tonight is Robert Zile. He's a Latvian MEP with a group of conservatives and reformists and a former finance minister of Latvia. Which of these stories do you like, Robert?
Well, actually, it's a political cat. I think I have seen this cat in early summer this year when we visited Downing Street 10. So.
Do you like this guy? I haven't seen it. Darren, have you seen
I have stroked Larry the cat.
You have.
Because about Brexit.
Oh, so lucky. All right, and joining us as well tonight is Eleonore Evi. She's an Italian MEP with the Five Star Movement and belongs to the Freedom and Direct Democracy group. Eleonore, which one are you looking at? I think we can guess.
I think it's quite clear. I'm going to comment on the Italian situation.
All right, and that is actually where we are beginning tonight, because with three words meant to scare Italy straight: excessive deficit procedure. Now, does that mean anything? But instead of bringing Rome's populist government to heel, Brussels could be playing right into its hands. Today, the European Commission said that Italy should face disciplinary action over its budget for, quote, serious non-compliance with fiscal rules, a move that could eventually lead to fines.
Today we confirm our assessment that Italy's draft budgetary plan is in particularly serious non-compliance with the Council recommendation of 13th of July. We conclude that an opening debt-based excessive deficit procedure is thus warranted.
Serious non-compliance. Darren, let's just start with how serious is this?
Well, this is a process rather than a moment, and the rejection of Italy's budget, which happened back in October, and now we're looking at kind of the start of the punitive process. How does the European Union get its stick out to beat Italy, essentially, over the next 6 months or so? What has been interesting, I think, are several things, first of all, Tessa. I think how the markets responded to this. Actually, Italian bond yields have held pretty steady today, if not up. A sign, I think, that the markets at least expect there to be some form of compromise on this issue. Second of all, as I say, this is something that's going to play out at the EU Council in December, at the meeting of finance ministers in January, so we're not going to see anything immediately. But third of all, and most interesting, has been the reaction, of course, from Italy itself. We've heard from the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister essentially saying we are not going to budge on all of this.
Exactly.
Italy is not going to roll over.
Yeah, in fact, the Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini, he just laughed off the idea of the infringement procedure. It's a procedure. And speaking from Rome, he actually said, has a letter from Brussels arrived? I'm waiting for one from Father Christmas too. We will politely talk as we have always done. We will have dialogue, and I'm going to keep going. So he isn't going to change his tune. I will go to you, Eleonore. Is this the game plan? I mean, is Italy trying to just stick to the line until the European Parliament elections? Because there is some hope that there will be anti-austerity groups that will probably make it into position, into power.
But what I can say now is that Italy is, for the first time, proposing a budgetary plan which is completely diverse from the past, and we strongly believe that we are putting inside this budgetary plan all the efforts and courage in order to change the situation that we have in Italy. We wanted to give rights and dignity to citizens. We wanted to introduce minimum income schemes. We wanted to...
But it's the reason why Italy is not changing position despite threats from Brussels, because they think they can get away with it. Where's that confidence coming from?
Well, my confidence is that there's going to be a dialogue, even in the future, in order to set the correct numbers, I would say, in order to do what we promised during the electoral campaign 6 months ago, and in order to be compliant with the European rules. We don't want to give the impression of do not care about the European laws today.
Roberts, do you think this is really about the budget or more of a political chess game that's happening?
I think both of them. Of course, Minister Salvini's response was understandable. It's a political statement for the Italian citizens. That's understandable. But I know Valdis Dombrovskis, he was colleague. You see, we have the same accent in English. He was a good friend and colleague. We used to work in one government. He is a very careful man and he's responsible for this budget. If he is proposing on behalf of Commission to the Council to start excessive deficit procedure, it means it's really a fact. It's 2.9%.
Yeah, but is the Commission doing this
deficit,
because
it's too high, definitely.
Some officials are saying that the Commission is doing this because by the time the European elections arrive, any sanctions would probably be shelved, basically.
Yeah, maybe yes, but what we have alternative? We can say is like, look, forget about rules. Well, we had a very difficult crisis in Latvia 10 years ago. We lost almost more than 20% of GDP. It fell down. So, but we made the internal devaluation of the currency because we wanted to be in euro. And if now somebody of Eurozone countries really would like to live under not the rules and have a big gross government debt already now, we have about 40%, Italy have 131%, and your economy is much bigger than Latvia.
Okay. I think
so there is a bit of issue.
The Commission is split on us. There are the doves and the hawks. There are people who say we should take the foot off the pedal a little bit here, we should give Italy a bit more room on this, and clearly there are people who are concerned about the impact it may well have on the election, who do believe that if Italy is breaking the rules or if they've not stood up the commitments that they've made previously, that, countries have to abide by the rules. But you listen to the rhetoric coming from Italy, where they're talking about confronting Juncker over these Italian plans, that the people need to respect the Italian people, that they give €5 billion more into the EU budget than they take out. I think that is the type of tone and the language we're going to hear over the next 6 months.
Especially in the context of, in light of the elections. But is it too big of a gamble for Italy with the potential sanctions actually include loss of access to the funds of the EU? That's one of, potentially, if the sanctions come through. Isn't a big risk?
Well, I would change also your question into another reflection. Don't you agree that in the last 6 months of this European Commission, it's quite dangerous to act in such political way? Shouldn't we have like a white semester?
But the Italian government, Salvini, is acting very politically, as you say.
Well, we are doing what also our citizens have asked to do. So, I mean, we have been very much courageous in terms of defining the kind of politics that we wanted to implement in Italy, but we still, of course, according to the European laws. That's also another thing that I wanted to state clearly. As many opinion makers are stressing the fact that Italy wanted to break the rules and wanted to go on with these situation of crisis.
Yeah, you're talking about breaking the rules, and certainly Brussels wants to implement the rules and is not taking no for an answer. So it's definitely a confrontation that is still coming.
Yeah, if I may,
5 seconds.
Okay, I partly agree with Eleonora. Said if it would be Italian government different, more mainstream government, reaction of the Commission would be much softer.
Well, that confrontation still is going to continue. But another one that actually we are watching tonight, an international confrontation for that matter, is the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. The U.S. president now says that he will stand by Riyadh despite the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and implications that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the operation. Donald Trump says taking action would come at too great of a cost.
It's all about, for me, very simple. It's America first. Saudi Arabia, if we broke with them, I think your oil prices would go through the roof. I've kept them down. They've helped me keep them down. Right now we have low oil prices, or relatively. I'd like to see it go down even lower. But I think that it's a very simple equation for me. I'm about make America great again, and I'm about America first. I'm not going to destroy the world economy, and I'm not going to destroy the economy for our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia. For our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia.
And joining me to talk more about this is Andrew Byrne, Brussels correspondent for the Sunday Times, and Helmut Scholz. He's a German MEP with a group of United European Left. And of course, Darren McCaffrey is still with us. All right, let us talk about what Trump was saying there. He was saying something different, but is his action actually is no different from other American presidents we've seen before him when it comes to Saudi Arabia? What do you think, Helmut?
I would say he's continuing a certain line, but he is now giving a free ticket for a policy which I can't understand. Because he, knowing about the 1 billion money given to Saudi Arabia, partly for
But other presidents have made deals with Saudi Arabia.
But now, when this murder has happened, and it is clear that it is committed.
But it's not the first time that human rights groups have been calling out Saudi Arabia for human rights violations, for example. So it's not like something different just started. I mean, it's a very highly publicized.
I mean, we can't pretend that Saudi Arabia was ever a sort of a shining light for human rights standards across the world. So in a way, I mean, I'm not sure I necessarily approve of the tone or the comments, but it does reveal the consistency of American foreign policy towards Saudi Arabia for decades. And also, let's not forget that Emmanuel Macron, when asked about his response to this Khashoggi killing, also declined to say that he would stop arms exports to Saudi Arabia. So I think we should look at actions as well as words.
So is Trump actually just being the most honest of all the leaders in America and in Europe, in fact?
Yeah, I think in many ways he is. This is real politics, and he is a real politics president in many regards, making it perfectly clear that when it comes down to it, that this one man's death, this one man's murder is not as important as he would see it, the tens of thousands of jobs in the United States and the billions of dollars worth of trade that matters. On it, and we could pick out a whole load of examples, a whole load of countries, the United States, that Western allies are in relationships with, who do bad things, who carry out killings and murders, sometimes not under the warranty of law. There was a report out last week, I think at the end of last week, that suggested even the United States alone had been involved in wars that had killed 500,000 people and cost well over $1 trillion since 2001. Now, you might think that's a completely separate thing, but some of those wars, or at least one of them, is viewed largely by the international community to be illegal. So, the United States, and we can look at the United States to be the world's police person and to have higher standards, but many people also don't look at the United States like that.
To Helmut's point, you were talking about the rhetoric used here. Do you think it could possibly embolden other countries to just they would get away with it if this should happen again?
No, I mean, I can't agree that this double standard he is introducing just now, when we are talking about the trade conflicts globally, I mean, between the United States and China, the Russian Federation, the EU has sanctions against the Russian Federation. So where is the standard? Where is the real political and human rights value?
But when has the United States ever not had double standards? In fact, when has any country in the world not had double standards?
Very good question.
We can ask about Germany as well.
I could agree, but I would say we should not let him do this and continuing and even openly saying, I don't care anymore about human rights, about killings, and please go ahead and I will.
President Obama might have said he cared about human rights, but then he was authorizing drone strikes against individuals that some people would view as illegal.
Yeah, so, but the question is why he has done that. Has he been under the pressure of the military-industrial complex in the United States, the arms industries, etc.? So the question is, what is behind the words of the presidents? And here I think we have to go in more detail and ask what is going on. But this time, with this clear signal of yesterday or this morning's news, means that is just introducing to the Europeans, don't take it too seriously if you're speaking about human rights standards.
Okay.
I mean, I think the interesting backdrop to this question is that the murder which prompted this soul-searching and agonising in international politics was the murder of this journalist we know of.
Sure.
And of course, as fellow journalists, this is an appalling crime and it shouldn't go unpunished, as I think many have said, even within Saudi Arabia. But I think it's important to bear in mind that Saudi Arabia has also been responsible for killing thousands of people in Yemen through its war there. It's kidnapped the Prime Minister of Lebanon and held him hostage, and it's holding people of its own ruling elite hostage in a hotel. So I think the whole thing is quite strange in a way, and I think it's important. Sure, this one case illustrates lots of problems, but I'm just curious. I still haven't quite figured out why this one murder, rather than a whole catalogue of crimes by the Saudi kingdom, has catalysed.
Yeah, indeed. The executions that have taken place in Saudi Arabia.
Yes. I'll give you the last word on this topic.
But maybe that is a lighthouse with a step of President Trump, because we should also look into the European policies. So finally, the German government has decided to stop the arms delivering to Saudi Arabia. But of course, we are also having been too much and too long silent on the issue.
Yeah, it took a while. Why just now is the question everyone's asking. All right, well, across the border, the Saudi border, that is, there are concerns tonight about the fate of a British citizen. The United Arab Emirates, the neighbor of Saudi Arabia, has sentenced university student Matthew Hedges to life in prison after he was convicted of spying. Alex Morgan has been looking into this. Alex, what do we know of this story, of this case?
Tessa, it was a court appearance that lasted less than 5 minutes, and yet it sentenced this man, Matthew Hedges, 31-year-old Matthew Hedges, to life behind bars, charged with spying. Now, let me break down this for you, take us back to where it all began. It started on the 5th of May. Matthew was researching for his PhD at Durham University in the UAE. He was arrested, detained at Dubai International Airport on May the 5th as he attempted to leave the country. He was then held in solitary confinement before being charged with spying. Well, in this court appearance today, that is Wednesday, for less than 5 minutes, when his family say a lawyer was not present, he was charged. That charge was converted into a sentence, a life behind bars sentence for spying on behalf, the accusation goes, of the United Kingdom against the United Arab Emirates. Now, I spoke to Matthew's wife and I asked about his PhD research. She described it as looking at the security concerns for the UAE after the Arab Spring. She denied, as has Matthew, as has the UK, all along that Matthew is a spy, and this is deeply political. Let me bring you up what the UK Foreign Secretary had to say. In a statement, he said, "Today's verdict is not what we expect from a friend and trusted partner of the United Kingdom. It runs contrary to earlier assurances." He went on to say it will have repercussions for the relationship between the UK and the UAE. Well, standing up in Parliament, Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, echoed those comments, saying, "We are deeply disappointed. We will keep bringing this up at the highest level with the Emirati authorities." Well, last month on the 25th of October, I spoke to Daniela Tejada, that is Matthew's wife. At this stage, she was hopeful that there might have been a turn in the case, but all along she'd been calling on the UK authorities to step up their efforts. She said she did all she could, so she wanted them to do more to secure his release. This is what she told me last month.
And he is a British citizen, and the British government owe him that duty. I don't know what they should do or how they should do it, but I do feel that they should have much more arduous efforts towards bringing him back home safely to me.
So last month she called for more arduous efforts, and today in a statement, she wasn't giving interviews today, but she did give a statement. She said this, they say that the UAE is an ally of the UK, but the overwhelmingly arbitrary handling of this crisis, of this case, she says, shows otherwise. She says here a more sinister reality. And she is effectively saying here, this doesn't look much like an alliance or how an ally would treat Matthew. So all along, Matthew insisting he is innocent. He has around 30 days now to appeal this life sentence, but the UAE court basically sentencing him to life in prison on the accusation of being a spy for the UK. A very political case now at the highest levels, Tessa. We'll keep watching the story.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and the CUBE team. I mean, here we are again, the theme of how do you manage a situation that is very sensitive and you have to maintain that relationship with that country.
Well, I think there's no choice here. The British government will have to and I'm sure they are insisting at the highest levels, that the Emirati authorities reverse this decision or pardon this guy, Matthew Hedges, because, clearly, if we compare it to the last case we were talking about, a PhD student doing research then being sentenced in this case is not that different from surreptitiously abducting and torturing people like in the murder of Khashoggi. So I think, there has to be a reversal. I don't think it's tenable. And my fear is just that the British Foreign Service, which is, one of the Rolls-Royce of foreign services, I just hope that they have the bandwidth at the political level with everything else that's going on with Brexit to focus on this particular
very
case.
Quickly, Darren, do you think that there is really an emboldening coming from countries like...
Yeah, I think that's undoubtedly true, because we are living in a world in which you can get away with clearly murdering journalists seemingly without any consequences, and that will embolden others. I think in this case, Andrew's right, that, do the Foreign Office, or have they got the bandwidth to deal with this case, considering what else they're having to juggle.
Deal with.
And it was by all expectations, the Foreign Office were telling people that they were expecting a good decision. Today, that has clearly not happened, and that is a sign that they're going to have to put an awful lot more work in.
All right, let's move on to today's power play, because Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, he's under fire tonight. Despite comparing the arrival of asylum seekers to, quote, poison, he's managed to squeeze in an old friend. Here's today's power play. Nikola Gruevski, former Macedonian Prime Minister and longtime friend of Viktor Orban. Either loved or loathed at home, he led the former Yugoslav Republic for almost a decade, until he was forced to resign after a wiretapping scandal brought thousands to the streets. Wanted for corruption and sentenced to 2 years in prison, Gruevski fled Macedonia, and when his best pal sounded the alarm, Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban responded. In a Facebook post, Gruevski said Hungarian authorities had approved his application for asylum. But with Mr. Orban already under scrutiny by the EU, harboring a fugitive is unlikely to improve anything. As the first snow falls on Hungary, could things be about to get chilly for Viktor Orban? Very quick reaction from you, Helmut. We were talking about double standards earlier. It seems like asylum rules are not that strict anymore in Hungary, looking at this story.
I don't believe that they are not anymore so strict in Hungary, unfortunately. Here we need a clear European policy approach and everybody together according to the story. And why he is letting him in the country and denying others the chance to find a new home in Hungary. So he is really placing a double standard in that issue.
All right, 5 seconds left.
The other thing is, not only have the Hungarians bent the rules to allow in this corrupt fugitive prime minister, they've also escorted him through the Balkans in a Hungarian diplomatic car, which is an astonishing flouting of international procedures for a country that holds itself up as the tough guy on asylum law.
There's no wall there.
Right.
But we should not excuse ourselves with the cases in other countries. If Hungary, as a full member state of the European Union, is handling it this way, he is denying the European approach that there must be the right for everybody to access asylum.
All right, we'll leave it at that for tonight. Coming up on Our Politics, are EU privacy laws this year's Grinch? A German city is reportedly banning kids from posting their wish list to the local Christmas tree over data protection rules. Plus, Prime Minister Theresa May is in Brussels tonight to meet with the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, just as European opposition begins to mount. We'll tell you who's unhappy next. Welcome back to Our Politics. Now, UK Prime Minister Theresa May is in Brussels tonight. She's meeting with the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker to talk about the UK's future relationship with Europe post-Brexit. But the meeting comes as a string of member states voice their objections to a draft deal. For France, it's about fishing rights. For the Netherlands, it's competitive advantages. And Spain wants assurances about the future of Gibraltar. Here's what the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez had to say about that.
No podemos asumir que lo que vaya a pasar con Gibraltar en el futuro dependa de una negociación del Reino Unido con la Unión Europea. Tendrá que ser algo que definamos y negociemos y acordemos el Reino Unido y España. Por tanto, a día de hoy, lamento decir que un gobierno proeuropeo como es el gobierno de España votará, si no hay cambios, no al Brexit.
Well, joining me to navigate the choppy Brexit waters ahead from the EU27 perspective, we have Christine Bonnefoy, French socialist MEP with the S&D Group, Morten Løkkegaard, a Danish MEP with the ALDE Group, and Ana Lázaro Bosch, who's a Euronews correspondent from our Spanish service. All right, let's talk about, we just heard from the Spanish Prime Minister, let's talk about the French objection to this. Very quickly, can you summarize what does France have against this draft deal?
We want to recall that we need to have access to the sea. So the fishermen, the French, but also the Belgium and the Netherlands could access to these seas and to fish on this. It was part of the deal before, and we want it to be still on action now.
And there are other countries, I think, with all the problems with fisheries as well. The Danish.
And Danish also, sorry.
We are in this together, yeah.
Netherlands and Belgium.
So what is the Danish opposition to this?
Yeah, but basically it's both the agriculture industry and the fishermen, because 40% of Danish fish landed in Denmark is from the British waters. So we are very much dependent on we get a good deal on the fishery, and this is. Therefore, it's linked to the negotiation on the divorce deal here.
So we have fish, there are goods, a competitive advantage, and of course, Gibraltar. I mean, first, how big of a deal is this?
It could be a big deal. I think it's possible to find a solution in the next days before Sunday's summit. But it's true that for Spain it's becoming very serious. They really want to have written in the text in some way. They don't say how they want to see it, but they want to see it clear on the text, that Spain will have the right to veto, will be the one who can negotiate with London about the future relations with Gibraltar. So
are we seeing a real uncertainty here? Our political editor was saying earlier that the Sunday summit, it could be derailed. Are we seeing a real danger of the rest of the EU27 not being happy with this?
I don't think so, actually. I think this divorce deal, I think most of us will agree to. The point is, of course, taking it up right now is because it's very closely linked to the future deal. And that's why we have to step up efforts now to get this right on the several issues. For instance, fishery, for instance, Gibraltar. I think that the problem right now is get the British on board. That's the main problem. But assuming that they will get on board, I think that the talks about the future will start now, and that's why we're sitting here.
But we say that everybody's on board, but if you remember the fight of fishermen, the British and the French fishermen, that got quite serious. You can't say to the fishermen, well, just get on board and let's just move forward. Is this serious? How serious is that?
Yes, it's very important, but we also have to think about the 3 million of Europeans living in Great Britain. This is also a very big concern for us, not only the French, not only the Social and Democrat, but I think all the members of the European Parliament to take care of the people, not only the question of economics, of single market, of this stuff, but also the people living now in Great Britain, what will happen to them tomorrow if we don't have a good deal for them too. And this is a really important matter for us here in the European Parliament.
And Anna, the Spanish government, they were saying that they were not briefed on this. Is there a feeling that this was just rammed through without really taking into account the rest of the concerns?
What it happened that is there was this article 184 that appeared at the very last minute. It was not negotiated before, it was not seen before, so the Spanish government just discovered it after the text was given to everyone.
Article 184 says it's a negotiation between the UK and the EU, not Spain and the UK.
Yeah, and it's based on good faith. Right. And Spain don't want good faith. They want the certainty, the legal certainty that this is going to be like that.
This goes for the fish question also, because in the very last minute they have a very few sentences in the draft text about the fishing industry and the future deal on fish, because so many complicated things have to be dealt with.
So is there something in the way that it was negotiated by the negotiators that didn't feel quite right?
No, I can't say that. I just say that they have so many difficulties to get the divorce deal in order and to get it through, that all these future questions which should have been dealt with already are not dealt with. So they kick the can down the street.
So what do we do now? So if it's kicking it down the road, then it's going to come up.
Yeah,
again.
It will, and it will be a hard question. I mean, I just had a briefing with my embassy yesterday, and these guys, they are very close to negotiations. They told me that this is going to be a very, very hard question, because this is a key point for the British. Yeah. I mean, they have promised the British fishermen that this will be all right, that anyone would have to get out of their fishing waters, and they can't deliver on that if they want to have a deal with us.
I mean, there's more, because you have fish, goods, Gibraltar, there's actually more. Because we've heard objections from all those countries. European countries are not the only ones watching Brexit. the Brexit negotiations. Obviously, the people of Scotland, they're also paying very, very close attention to this, especially after some comments from Spain. Let's take a look. Welcome to Scotland, the UK's most northerly nation with a strong identity and an active independence movement. In 2014, Scots rejected separation from the rest of the UK, much to the relief of London. It was thought that Madrid, worried about its secessionist movement in Catalonia, might block an independent Scotland's entry into the EU. But 4 years later, and things have changed. With the UK government burning its bridges with EU allies over Brexit, Spain's new socialist government is striking a different tone. If Westminster agrees, why should we be against it? The country's foreign minister has asked. He went on to fire a shot at London, suggesting that the UK will split apart before Spain. This will come as welcome news to the Scottish nationalist leader.
The impact of Brexit on everybody on our country is going to be disastrous, and that's why I have a duty to allow people the choice to opt for something better.
Though it's the last thing the UK Prime Minister will want to hear as she battles to deliver Brexit while keeping the United Kingdom together. But could Spain be overinflating the appetite for Scottish independence? A poll published this week found that 60% of Scots would vote to remain in the UK if they were asked. But with Brexit on the horizon, public opinion in Scotland may yet shift in favour of an independent future. So it's another twist to the Brexit story. Christine, you were smiling at the footage.
Yeah, because, well, we are laughing here, but it's really not funny. And the Brexit is a lose-lose vote. And we all have to take into account and sometimes to smile. Just to, we don't know where we are going to, but there is still a lot of steps to take. And the first one will be very important is the vote in London next month. This is maybe it will be a no deal because the House will say no. So we don't know.
It is. So maybe indeed we can just smile our way through this. A lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics. After the break, Ireland's foreign minister takes aim at Brexiteers, blasting their macho language and for being out of touch with reality. Catch our full interview with Simon Coveney in Dublin when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Raw Politics. As opposition mounts to a draft Brexit deal hammered out last week, Ireland's foreign minister is standing firm, saying there is no room for manoeuvring within the withdrawal agreement. His comments came in an exclusive interview with Euronews. And for more on that, I am joined by our correspondent, Shona Murray, who is in Dublin for us. Shona, can you tell us about your interview with the foreign minister today?
Well, as you can imagine, Tessa, things are quite guarded here. There's also a mood of anticipation because we know that Ireland has been at the epicentre of these Brexit talks. For 2 years almost, the negotiations have been taking place, and Ireland has huge stakes in this game. So the foreign minister I spoke to today said several things. First of all, he was quite critical of some of the tone of the Brexiteers and their simplistic language, as he put it, in relation to how easy this deal could be produced. He's also saying that he would love if the UK would remain in the European Union, but he wasn't calling for a second referendum. He said it was very clear that Theresa May said she doesn't want to extend Article 50. But I also asked him if there was any room to manoeuvre, because we've heard from MPs on both sides of the divide, Remains, Tories, Labourers, Brexiteers, that they claimed that they could actually change this withdrawal agreement. He said absolutely 100%. The deal is as it stays and it won't be reopened. Take a listen to what he said.
The withdrawal treaty text is agreed. It's closed. The British government signed off on it. It's not going to reopen. If you reopen it for one issue, well then there's an avalanche of other asks, I'm sure, that different countries will have. So no, that text is closed. And let's hope that we can see a positive text now on what the future relationship is likely to look like by the setting of parameters today in that political declaration.
Will the EU welcome the UK back with open arms and possibly extend Article 50?
Theresa May has made it very clear she doesn't want to extend Article 50. So I think we probably need to talk less about the what-ifs here and talk more about what is actually on the table and agreed.
But the EU would welcome the UK back.
Oh, sure, of course we would. We'd welcome Britain back in a heartbeat. In my view, nobody wants Britain to leave. Everybody, in fact, so many EU countries look to Britain for direction. The EU without Britain, for me, is a lesser place. And I would certainly, at any point in the future, would love to see Britain rejoining or being part of the European Union. But look, that is, that's talking about the future in a way that doesn't reflect today's reality. Sometimes when I listen to hardline Brexiteers, they simplify Brexit almost into a totally unreal series of choices, where Britain can have it every which way, and where the EU will just have to suck it up. And that kind of simplistic, in some cases macho language, doesn't reflect reality. It is not in Britain's interest to crash out of the European Union with no agreements in a whole series of different areas, when Britain and the EU together over the last 43 or 44 years have been putting hundreds of different mechanisms and agreements in place that can't just be pulled apart overnight.
What would you say to the Remainers and Brexiteers, many of whom are willing to vote against this deal when they get the chance in December? What next if that fails?
I am hopeful that the British Parliament can support this. As the debate develops, as the Prime Minister sells this deal, I think she's very persuasive, and I think she has right on her side in terms of what's in the deal. And I think her arguments have gathered momentum in the last number of days. Let's wait and see how this develops. There's another 3 weeks to go, probably, before the vote takes place in Westminster. And instead of talking about what happens after that vote, should it not pass, I think we should be concentrating for the next 3 weeks on actually talking about what's in the agreement that's taken 2 years to put together, and to try to reassure people that it's not a threat to anybody. Instead, it's a practical series of compromises that allows both sides to move forward together.
Now, we know that, of course, the odds are stacked against Theresa May when it comes to this parliamentary vote in December. And the Irish government is very realistic about that, naturally. But it does hope that within the next few days, particularly upon the publication of the political declaration of the future agreement, there'll be enough to placate some in the Tory party and enough on the Remain side that this isn't such a bad deal for the UK, and that in the future, they can have that frictionless trade and they can maintain the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom and even possibly placate the DUP. It's a really tall charge, it's a tall order, but there is hope that can happen. Just one other thing I did speak to the Foreign Minister about earlier. He is pretty self-assured that this extraordinary council meeting will go ahead on Sunday and there will be a formalisation of the withdrawal agreement. There is a belief that the concerns about Gibraltar, the future of Gibraltar, the Spanish concerns, and of course the French and other countries' concerns related to level playing field, that can also be dealt with, and in actual fact people can move on in unison. It's December really where they're looking at.
All right, thank you for that, Shona Murray, talking to us there from Dublin. And with me in the studio to discuss this in more detail, we still have Christine Bonnefoy, and also joining us is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, and Martina Anderson, who's an Irish Sinn Féin MEP with the European United Left Nordic Green Left group. Right, I'll start with you, Martina, because we had heard rumours and murmurs that the DUP would be planning to vote down this deal in the House of Commons. What is Sinn Féin's position when it comes to the draft deal?
Well, in the first instance, we welcome the fact that there's going to be no physical infrastructure on the island of Ireland, on the border partition in Ireland. But Sinn Féin produced a case for designated special status for the North to remain within the EU. And that case was legally tested in that we had legal advice to show that that was legally possible and permissible. And we cannot have a situation where 50 years on from the Civil Rights Campaign and 20 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, that hard-won rights are going to be stripped away.
When it comes to the draft deal, what do you think about that? Is it a go?
Well, I think the draft deal avoids a physical infrastructure on the island of Ireland, but what it doesn't do is protect people. It protects cattle. It protects white goods. It protects a wash machine and a tumble dryer.
Christine is
but it
nodding her
doesn't
head.
protect people. And that's what I am extremely concerned about.
People born in Northern Ireland will still be able to be European citizens.
Well,
through their Irish citizenship.
Well, I'm assuming you have read the agreement and read the whole 600 pages, because I've been through it.
Yeah.
So let me say, in December, we were told that people born on the island of Ireland and people born on the north of Ireland will be able to enjoy and access and exercise our rights where we reside. That language is removed from the agreement. So you are out of step with human rights and the entire human rights equality constituency
but that's not right in the sense that you can avail of your... If you're born in Northern Ireland, you can avail of your Irish citizenship.
Well, hold on, let me just bring
Christine
to the discussion. Just answer that one. I'm assuming you also read the answer that I received from President Juncker in July when he said that we in the north of Ireland will be merely able to exercise our rights as we were a third world
Christine,
country.
would you jump into
it's
this
not
when
true
it comes
what you're saying.
to the Irish question?
Yeah. For us, I mean the Socialist and Democrats group, we were very concerned by the fact that we shouldn't come back to a very back history where Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland were completely with this border. It was not bearable, and we were very cautious on this, on the agreement, and this is why we are looking at it. And just like you said, and just like I said before, the question of the single market, the question of economics is really dealt in this agreement, but the question of people,
so you're not happy
of
with
humanity, the 3 million living in the United Kingdom, or the question of Ireland has to be really carefully read.
So you think it's not complete yet?
I haven't read all the 300 pages, so I won't say more than this, that we are very cautious and we are looking at it very carefully about this situation of people, not the goods, the people.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that even with the draft deal, the question of the Irish border and the details of it is not has not been completely put to rest. All right. But now we'll move on, because let's talk about the holidays, which is just around the corner. It's almost that time of the year. And now we're not talking about Santa or gifts or mistletoe. We're talking about when governments and Christmas collide. It's Yuletide politics. With Christmas fast approaching, you're probably starting to write your letter to Santa Claus. And if you're in the southern German town of Roth, you might be planning to follow the much-loved tradition of hanging your wish list on the town's Christmas tree. Or maybe not. With the EU's general data protection regulation now in place, the town has decided to put an end to the tradition for fear of getting into hot water over the handling of children's personal details. Looks like the town's children will just have to email the North Pole instead. All right, Darren, I'll quickly go to you on this one. Just a quick reaction. Children putting their, wishes on Christmases, and then there's privacy.
That's what I say. This is teetering, not even teetering. It's well spilled into the utterly ridiculous. I'm sure they'll get away around it, but kids should be able to enjoy Christmas without having to worry about data protection laws. I mean, my word.
Keep your wishes a secret.
Dreams,
Precisely. What's
Keep
the
it
world
a secret. All right. Well, after the breaks on Raw Politics, the UN's environment chief is forced to step down over a controversy about his own CO2 footprint. Do stay with us.
The Secretary General has accepted the resignation of Eric Solheim, the Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme. Mr. Solheim's resignation is effective Thursday, November 22nd.
All right, so that's the United Nations response to a public relations embarrassment. According to a leaked internal audit, the director of its environment program engaged in some unfriendly environmental behavior. Eric Solheim spent nearly 100,000 euros on air travel and hotels in just 22 months, spending 529 out of 668 days on the road. That's a lot of jet setting and a lot of air pollution. The audit said it harmed the reputation of the UN environment, and it's a body that deals with green issues and sustainability. All right, to discuss this, I am joined by Linnea Engström, a Swedish MEP with the Greens. And back with me is Andrew Byrne from the Sunday Times and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, there is more to this story. I mean, some countries, I think, had pulled out funding from the UN environment because of conflict of interest, also relating to the same person. But when it comes to this, I mean, 430,000, that's not that much in 22 months, is it? I mean, your reaction from the Greens. Let's hear from you.
Testicles and holiday
I think this is appalling. I mean, come on. We really need the UN as a forerunner in the fight against climate change and climate action. And this kind of undermines, I would say, the credibility that this institution still has to bear.
But my question is, if you do have to travel, let's say, to get your job done, then what are you supposed to do?
Of course you need to travel, but you also have to walk the talk. And I think that's very important when you're in a powerful position as the UN chief executive of UNEP. I mean, that's a very powerful position, and you have to show leadership. And leadership is really about walking the talk. So I think citizens are really wondering, why should I when you can't? You have all the money and all the abilities.
Is that what it is? Is it hypocrisy?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of strange goings-on happening in this UN office. I mean, apparently this guy allowed staff to work remotely from Europe when the office is in Kenya, which doesn't seem like a very functional or efficient working process. And there were also questions around his wife, I believe, being employed by a project he'd given to funding from. So I mean, there's a huge amount of issues here. And, you know, the UN as an organisation, it's a huge organisation, but if you actually go to the UN headquarters in New York, you know, the carpets are kind of ragged. The earpieces for translators are the same ones they've had from the 70s. All of the budgets are under strain. And so I think, you know, standards in public office for the UN, it's such an easy pot shot to take, and he's given a hostage to fortune.
He was headquartered in Kenya. Some of the staff were working in Europe. The headquarters of the UN is in New York. Maybe not surprised you're going to rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars on flights. You know, people do have to. Well, I'm sorry, but the whole thing is.
But why were they in Europe?
People do have to be able to.
The point was they should have been based in the island.
I'm defending the fact that people do need to unbelievably get places.
Is it his fault though? Is it the UN?
And when they're on different continents, you have to fly. I'm sorry,
of course, he's the one to blame.
Okay,
of course.
But why were they on different continents, for one thing? I mean, they were employed to work in Kenya, and without formal procedures, they said, it's fine, you can work for Paris or London, sure, why not?
But it's understandable that if they're headquartered in Kenya, he may have at least travel to New York every so often.
No, he put staff in Europe.
No, but come on, I mean, of course, you need to show leadership in this position. I think that's
so what, he should never get on a plane?
Of course,
not drive a car?
No, but this is...
How far does it go?
He's been using $500,000. That's an extreme amount of money.
Well,
and look at it from a citizen's perspective, where people have to, turn each and single dime in order to make ends meet. And then you have these really powerful people doing this. No, that's not how we build democracy. That's not how we build.
So should the UN's World Environment Chief just stay in Kenya? He should just stay in Kenya.
Well, it's broader than just his flights. It's
Okay, guys, let's go to something that's a little lighter right now. So I'm going to take you to Downing Street for today's raw moment, because one of the attendees of yesterday's cabinet meeting needed little help getting through that famous front door. Let's take a look.
When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Can you govern without the DUP, Mr. Fox? How will you keep the DUP on side? How will you keep the DUP on side? Can you govern without the support of the DUP, Attorney General? Are you worried the DUP will pull the plug? Are the DUP going to send to your government, sir?
You've met the cat, Darren.
There aren't many cats to get a policeman to open the door for them. I think David Cameron brought Larry the cat into Downing Street. Theresa May, I don't think he's a big fan.
Have you met the cat?
I haven't. I'm a dog person, to be honest. Okay. And I have to say, I think when the annals of the history of Brexit are written, and historians puzzle over how Britain slid towards this huge constitutional crisis, seemingly unaware of the decisions that was taking, I think the hours spent cooing over this cat will sort of feature largely as a weird sort of near Rowan fiddling while Rowan burns.
It may be in Downing Street longer than, I don't know, could see the third Prime Minister in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Apparently terrible at killing rats, though. absolutely awful, really lazy.
All show.
Do you have something to say about the cat, Linnea?
She's preparing for the cat fight. That's obvious.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very
Well, Larry, the Downing Street cat, has his own Twitter account, believe it or not, and later tweeted to say he's yet to persuade Theresa May of the benefits of free movement. All right. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'd like to hear your views. Tell us what you're talking about. Do stay with us. Join us again tomorrow, that is. See you then.